Earth Day a good time to step back and see where we are in the fight against climate change? How would you characterise the point we've reached right now? It does seem as if the US and China politically are at some kind of inflection point.
Yes, first of all, happy Earth Day, obviously, but there is real momentum. On the one side, there is a job to be done. No country has really moved significantly since the Paris Agreement 5 years ago. We're still projecting to about 3 degrees at the end of this century. And more importantly, we need to cut emissions by 50% in the next 10 years. And few countries have made those commitments still. But there are signs of optimism. And the first one is really the conference that we now have in the US behind Earth Summit, led by President Biden and John Kerry. We've seen about 60 to 70% of the global economy already making commitments to be net zero by 2050. And we expect today and onwards, many countries also to make commitments by 2030. We've seen the UK making commitments for a 78% reduction by 2035. We've seen countries like Japan coming in, Korea, China by 2060. And we expect after the EU's 55% reduction commitment, we expect the US today to come in with a reduction of 45 to 50%. So there's real momentum at the government level, real momentum around policy changes. You heard Mark Carney talk about real momentum in the financial market, and not surprisingly, that is also reflected in the private sector.
Yes, and in the private sector, amongst the businesses you talk to, Paul, what is the thinking? Is the thinking that finally the politics has caught up with things that they've been thinking for a long time, or do businesses still, or do they feel as if this is going to be something that stands in their way? I have lots of conversations with businesses, with management, and the reference to the circular economy seems to have increased many-fold in recent years.
Oh, absolutely. Business understands this, and in some respects has been ahead of most of the governments over the last few years. We have about 25% of the businesses that have made net zero commitments for 2030, but that clearly isn't enough. And businesses can do about 60, 70% themselves. In fact, today already the technologies and the know-how is available to take care of the 60, 70% and actually do that profitably. But there are free riders in business, as usual, a little bit more shorter-term oriented, self-centered businesses. And there are also some bottlenecks that need to be changed. And this is where governments come in. So seeing now the combination of governments working together hand in hand with business is obviously the sweet spot you want to be. The reason business is moving is it's becoming increasingly attractive. Greening our economy is a job creator. Greening our economy is a financial incentive builder. We estimate about $12 trillion can be unlocked, and the smart companies are positioning themselves, obviously, for the future, not least helped by the pressure of the financial market. You just heard Mark talk about the Glasgow Alliance of $70 trillion of assets under management. And frankly, 90% of investors now see climate as one of the highest risks for their portfolios.
You say that, Paul, that this is going to be a green job creator. Tell me more about where the jobs come from, because an alternative analysis would be that you actually want energy to be cheaper to allow growth elsewhere. So you don't necessarily want to create jobs within energy production. You want to create jobs in other parts of the economy. How is it that the green revolution creates jobs? It might not feel like that if you work in the car sector, for example.
Well, if you work in some of the sectors that need to transform, like the fossil fuel or the combustion engine, if you want to, when you talk about the car, we need to be sure that we have a fair transition for these people. They've helped us, they've built their economies until today. But the reality is that greening our economy will create actually more jobs, more resilient jobs, and actually better jobs. You take already in the US, we see 6 times more job creation in the green energy sector. In fact, 60% of our energy that in the world is already cheaper being green energy than fossil. So I think we've passed that tipping point. We just need to accelerate it. And the jobs will come from restoration of our biodiversity, retrofitting buildings, the big investments that are now being unlocked on infrastructure, where we're moving to greener infrastructures, looking at our food and value chain and moving to regenerative agriculture, mobility, and electrifying our mobility systems. All these investments that are needed are actually only requiring about 1.5% more in spending, far less than the cost that we will be incurring, as COVID has shown. And they also actually are creating the better jobs that we desperately need.